Welcome to this Deep Dive, where we take fascinating sources and extract the core insights for you. Today, we're tackling a big one, the architecture of human satisfaction.
That's right. And for this deep dive, we're drawing from a really comprehensive report. It was actually inspired by one person's reflections on, finding contentment through life's ups and downs.
Okay.
And it pulls together insights from, well, everywhere. Psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, sociology, genetics, even history and ethics. It's quite the mix.
Wow, yeah, that sounds incredibly thorough.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today really is to unpack this complex idea for you, the listener.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get beyond just a simple definition, right? Explore what really drives satisfaction, both inside us and in the world around us.
And look at how different fields see it, maybe even trace its evolutionary roots.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut, your fast track to understanding something really fundamental about being human.
Absolutely. And what jumps out immediately is that satisfaction isn't simple. It's not just one thing.
No, definitely not. It sounds like a dynamic blend of biology, psychology, our social world.
Philosophy, personal circumstances. It's all in there.
And understanding these different pieces, well, it seems crucial, not just for your own well-being, but maybe even for society as a whole.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so let's dive in. First things first. How do we even define satisfaction? If it's pulling from so many fields, it must be tricky.
You hit the nail on the head. The report really emphasizes that challenge. There's no single universal definition because, well, it's so subjective.
Right. It feels different for everyone.
And each discipline kind of comes at it with its own angle, its own lens.
Okay, so where's a good place to start? Psychology seems like an obvious one.
It really is. Psychology gives us the concept of subjective well-being, or SWB.
SWB, okay.
Yeah, and in a lot of the research, SWB is basically used as a synonym for happiness. It's about how you, as an individual, evaluate your life, both your thoughts about it and your feelings.
So it's not just like feeling good right this second.
Mm-hmm.
It's broader.
Exactly. There's a key model here, Ed Diener's tripartite model. It breaks SWB down into three parts.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's life satisfaction. Let's call it LS. This is the cognitive piece, your overall judgment of your life.
Like a global assessment.
Yeah, or satisfaction with specific areas, work, family, health, finances, It involves comparing where you are to where you want to be, your personal standards.
And is that pretty fixed?
It tends to be relatively stable for most people, yeah. More stable than moods, anyway.
Got it. So that's the thinking part. What about the feeling part?
Right. That's the other two components. One is frequent positive affect, just regularly experiencing good emotions like joy, contentment, excitement.
Feeling good often. Makes sense.
And the flip side, infrequent negative affect. So relatively few unpleasant emotions, sadness, anxiety, anger, that sort of thing.
Okay, so high SWB means you're generally satisfied with your life overall, and you feel more positive emotions than negative ones most of the time?
That's the gist of it, yeah. But the report does note that these three things, life satisfaction, positive affect, negative affect, they don't always move together perfectly.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, you could be pretty satisfied with your job overall, right? That's high LS in that domain. But maybe the day-to-day is still quite stressful, so your affect balance isn't purely positive.
I see. That makes sense. So how do researchers actually measure this stuff, if it's subjective?
Primarily, they just ask people. They use self-report surveys. You might have heard of the satisfaction with life scale, or maybe the Cantrell ladder, where you rate your life on a scale from worst possible to best possible.
Just asking people. Is that reliable?
It sounds almost too simple, but these measures have actually been shown to be surprisingly reliable and valid over time. They correlate with observable things like smiling, reports from friends, even some health outcomes.
Huh.
But of course, there are limitations. Self-reports can be influenced by your current mood or cultural ideas about happiness. And there's this interesting difference psychologists talk about our remembering self versus our experiencing self. How we evaluate our life looking back might be different from how we feel moment to moment.
Fascinating. Okay, so psychology gives us SWB. What about philosophy? They must have weighed in on this for, millennia.
Oh, absolutely. Philosophy offers some really deep and sometimes quite different ways of thinking about it. The report highlights two big ones, eudaimonia and hedonism.
Eudaimonia, that sounds profound. What is it?
Think Aristotle. It's often translated as flourishing or living well, but it's really not just about feeling happy.
Yeah.
It's more about an objective state, about fulfilling your human potential. living a life of purpose, meaning acting rationally, developing virtues. It's about the quality of your life as a whole, not just pleasant sensations.
So it's less about chasing highs and more about living a life of substance, even if it's hard sometimes.
Precisely. It emphasizes things like meaning, purpose, personal growth, living in accordance with your deeper values.
Okay, I get that. Then what about hedonism? That sounds more straightforward.
It is, in a way. Hedonism basically argues that pleasure is the ultimate good, the thing we should aim for.
Just maximizing pleasure.
Well, there are different flavors. Psychological hedonism says that's what actually motivates all our actions, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain. Axiological hedonism says only pleasure has real intrinsic value.
And ethical hedonism.
That argues we should pursue pleasure, morally speaking. Maybe just for ourselves, that's egoism, or maybe for the greatest number of people, which is more like utilitarianism.
But what counts as pleasure? Is it just like eating cake?
Well, proponents usually define pleasure pretty broadly. It can include physical sensations, sure, but also mental pleasures like reading a good book or solving a problem.
Okay. Are there criticisms of that view?
Yeah, the report mentions some classic ones, like are there other things besides pleasure that have intrinsic value, like knowledge or virtue or relationships? And also, are all pleasures equally good? Is the pleasure derived from helping someone the same morally as a pleasure derived from something harmful?
Good points. Okay, so we've got the mind, the philosophy. What about the brain itself? Neuroscience must have something to say about satisfaction.
Absolutely. Neuroscience drills down into the biological machinery. It points to the brain's reward circuits, particularly what's called the mesocorticolimbic dopamine system.
The dopamine system, we hear a lot about that.
We do. It's this network connecting key brain areas like the ventral tegmental area, the VTA, and the nucleus accumbens. It's crucial for processing rewards, motivating us to go after things, and learning what leads to good outcomes.
So dopamine makes us feel good when we get something we want.
It's involved in pleasure, yes, but it's maybe more strongly linked to motivation, the wanting part, and learning. But it's not just dopamine.
Okay.
Other neurotransmitters are critical too. Serotonin is huge for mood regulation. Endorphins are like natural painkillers released during rewarding activities. And oxytocin, the love hormone, is key for social bonding and trust.
Wow, it's a whole cocktail of brain chemicals.
It really is. These systems are the biological foundation for the feelings and motivations tied to satisfaction.
So our brains are basically wired to seek satisfaction.
In a fundamental way, yes. Which brings us nicely to the sociological perspective, which often talks about quality of life, or QOL.
Quality of life. How's that different from subjective well-being?
It's generally seen as broader. QOL is defined as how you perceive your position in life, but specifically within the context of your culture and values, and relative to your own goals and expectations.
So it brings in the external world more.
Exactly. It includes objective conditions, things like your health, your financial situation, your social relationships, safety, education, the environment you live in.
Right. Stuff you can potentially measure from the outside.
Yes, but it also includes your subjective evaluation of those conditions. So it blends the objective and subjective. It acknowledges that what constitutes a good life isn't just internal feelings. It's deeply tied to our circumstances and cultural context.
Okay, so QL, SWB, life satisfaction. They sound related but distinct.
They are definitely related, and sometimes the terms are used a bit interchangeably in research, which can be confusing. But QL tends to encompass more of the objective living conditions alongside the subjective feelings.
All right, that's a lot of different lenses. Psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, sociology. How do we pull this all together for a working definition of satisfaction for this deep dive?
Good question. The report argues for an integrated definition, one that acknowledges both our internal world, our feelings and thoughts, and the external realities of our lives.
So combining the subjective and the objective.
Precisely. It's seeing the interplay between, say, SWB, our subjective feelings and judgments, and things like QL or eudaimonia, which touch on objective conditions, capabilities, and living meaningfully.
Okay, so give us the synthesis. What's our working definition?
Let's define human satisfaction for our discussion as a complex, multifaceted state. It reflects our subjective evaluation of life, that's life satisfaction, and our emotional experiences, the balance of effect. But it's also informed by our objective life conditions quality of life. It's underpinned by biological mechanisms in the brain, shaped by our social and cultural context, and importantly, often involves a sense of meaning, purpose, or flourishing, that eudaimonic element.
So it's about feeling good, thinking your life is good, functioning well, and living meaningfully, all within your specific environment.
That captures it pretty well. And acknowledging that while we often rely on people telling us how satisfied they are, self-report objective indicators matter too.
That feels like a solid, comprehensive definition to work with. It really highlights how layered this is. Okay, now let's dig into the biology a bit more. You mentioned genes, brains, health. How deeply are these wired into our satisfaction levels?
They form a fundamental layer. The report really emphasizes these biological roots. We're talking genetics, the neurobiology of reward and mood, and this really strong link between psychological well-being and physical health. It goes both ways.
Let's start with genes. Is happiness or satisfaction something you're born with? Is there a satisfaction gene?
Not quite that simple. There isn't one gene. But research, especially studies comparing identical and fraternal twins and looking at families, consistently shows that components of SWB are heritable.
Heritable, meaning genetics plays a role.
Yes. Estimates from large studies, meta-analyses, suggest that genetic factors might explain somewhere around, say, 32 to 36% of the variation between people in SWB. Some studies push that even higher, maybe 40 to 50%.
Wow, that's actually quite a chunk. I might have guessed lower.
It surprises many people, and it seems to involve complex interactions, many genes working together, what they call additive and non-additive effects. Interestingly, most research hasn't found consistent, large differences between men and women in how heritable it is.
So if it's not one gene, how do they even study this? And why is it hard to pinpoint the exact genes involved?
Well, identifying specific genes is incredibly challenging because satisfaction is what we call a complex trait. It's likely influenced by thousands, maybe tens of thousands of genes, each having only a tiny, tiny effect on its own.
Ah, okay, so you need huge studies.
Exactly. You need enormous sample sizes to detect those small effects reliably. The report does mention some research looking at candidate genes thought to be involved based on their function, like variants in the dopamine D2 receptor gene, DRD2, have been looked at because dopamine is key for reward.
Right.
But the crucial takeaway here is that genetics provides a predisposition, not a destiny. It sets a range, perhaps, but our environment and our experiences are incredibly important in determining where we fall within that range.
So genes load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. That old saying.
Sort of, yeah. Or maybe genes influence things indirectly. For example, genes strongly influence personality traits. And we know traits like low neuroticism, being less prone to worry, and high extroversion, being outgoing, are strongly linked to higher SWB. So genes might shape our personality, which in turn shapes our satisfaction. It's complex interplay.
Okay, that makes sense. Genes provide a sort of baseline or potential.
Sure.
What about the brain's role in the moment-to-moment experience? We talked about the reward system.
Right, that reward system is central. The VTA, the nucleus accumbens, parts of the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, which processes emotions, the hippocampus involved in memory, they all work together. This network processes pleasure, yes, but also motivation, learning what's good for us, what to approach.
And the neurotransmitters are the messengers making it all happen.
Exactly. We mentioned dopamine key for reward prediction, motivation, learning. Serotonin crucial for mood balance, sleep, appetite. Low levels are linked to depression and anxiety. Endorphins, those are our internal opioids for pain relief, but also that runner's high feeling. And oxytocin, the bonding hormone, vital for trust, empathy, social connection. The report has a neat summary table of these guys.
It really sounds like an intricate biological dance.
It is, and it's important to remember this system evolved primarily for survival and reproduction, to drive us towards food, water, safety, social alliances, things that helped our ancestors pass on their genes.
Yeah.
But the modern world presents stimuli that can activate the system in ways that might not be aligned with long-term well-being.
Ah, the mismatch idea. Like
addictive drugs, which directly hijack the dopamine system, or maybe highly processed foods packed with sugar and fat. Or even, some argue, the constant pursuit of material possessions or social media validation. These can trigger reward signals, but don't necessarily lead to lasting deep satisfaction.
That's a really powerful point, our ancient wiring in a very novel environment. Okay, last piece on the biology front for now. The link between satisfaction and physical health. You said it's strong.
Very strong and well documented. Higher psychological well-being encompassing SWB, life satisfaction, optimism, purpose is consistently linked to better physical health outcomes and, remarkably, to living longer.
Longer life. Really? How strong is that link?
It's pretty robust, especially concerning cardiovascular health, heart disease, stroke. Multiple large studies show that people with higher positive well-being have a significantly lower risk of developing these conditions if they're initially healthy.
Wow.
One major study even ranked life satisfaction as a predictor right up there with traditional risk factors for heart disease. And for people who already have cardiovascular disease, things like optimism and purpose in life predict fewer subsequent heart attacks or strokes and better survival rates.
So feeling satisfied isn't just nice, it might actually protect your heart.
The evidence certainly points that way, and it's not just heart health. The longevity connection is seen across many studies and countries. Higher satisfaction predicts a longer life.
That's incredible. What about why? How does feeling good mentally translate into physical benefits?
It's likely a mix of things, and the connections probably go both ways. Happier, more satisfied people might simply adopt healthier behaviors.
Like exercising more, eating better.
Exactly. They might smoke less, sleep better. That's one pathway. Another involves physiological responses. There's evidence, though it's still being actively researched, that higher well-being might be linked to better immune function or lower levels of chronic inflammation.
Interesting.
And then there are psychological resources. People with higher well-being often have better coping skills, more resilience when faced with stress, stronger social support networks, all of which buffer against the negative health effects of adversity.
So it could be behavior, physiology, and coping resources all working together.
Most likely, yes. And it seems to be a two-way street, or maybe even a positive feedback loop. Feeling satisfied promotes health, and being healthy makes it easier to feel satisfied.
Okay, let's just take a breath here. We've journeyed from trying to define satisfaction, seeing it involves our thoughts, feelings, purpose, and circumstances, all the way down to our genes, our brain chemistry, and its profound links to our physical health and even how long we live.
It really underscores that satisfaction isn't some superficial layer on top of life. It's deeply woven into our biology and our overall functioning as human beings.
Yeah. And I think understanding these foundational pieces, the biology, the psychology, the philosophy, it gives you, the listener, a really powerful framework, helps cut through the noise and see what might genuinely contribute to a satisfying life, whether you're thinking about your own choices or bigger societal issues.
Absolutely. Recognizing that interplay between our internal state and our external world, our biology and our experiences, is key.
And that point you made about the reward system, how it evolved for one world but now exists in another, that really sticks with me. It makes you question where we seek rewards today. Are they aligned with deep, lasting contentment? Or are they more like those hijacked signals you mentioned? Something to reflect on.
It definitely raises important questions about evolutionary mismatch in our modern lives. Where are we placing our focus?
So, wrapping up this part of our deep dive, given this undeniable link between satisfaction, in its broadest sense, and health and longevity, it leads to a powerful thought, doesn't it?
Which is?
How might intentionally cultivating aspects of well-being, maybe stronger social ties, maybe a clearer sense of purpose, maybe healthier habits, how might that not just make your life better now, but actually shape your physical future, potentially adding years to your life and life to your years?
That's a compelling question to leave people with.
It really is. What's one small change, drawing from all this, that you, our listener, might explore in your own life? Definitely some food for thought there. Join us next time as we continue our deep dive into the forces that shape our lives.
This is DigitView.